Okay, so today is, I learned yesterday actually that today there are 2000, let me see if I had it correctly, 71 years since Julius Caesar, the great Roman emperor, when he crossed the Rubicon, the river, he uttered alea iacta est, which means the dice is cast, or the dice was cast, is translated in both ways. And because I always had an interest in architecture and chains or aleatory architecture, and thus, architecture and dice, I thought, let me prepare quickly a material about architecture and randomness. So here we are talking about architecture and randomness, 2071 years after the day when Julius Caesar uttered, I use the verb that I found on Wikipedia, uttered alea iacta est. So let's see what this subject brings to our attention. But first, I was intrigued by this quotation from this important North American painter, an artist, Frank Stella, who actually talks about architecture. Architecture can't fully represent the chaos and turmoil that are part of the human personality, but you need to put some of that turmoil into the architecture, or it isn't real. And I would agree with Frank Stella. Unfortunately, many architects avoid to address that turmoil, which I'm sure at least sometimes belongs to them as well. Any human being, any human life is trouble sometimes, and there is sometimes even chaos. We have to acknowledge them. But I think it's, as architects, it's also important to say something about this chaos and this turmoil that manifest themselves in our lives, and maybe not as rarely as we would like. Plus, chaos is it's maybe, I don't know, some people think it's a good thing in disguise. I met once a mathematician from California, Abraham was his name, I don't know if he's still alive, who invented the word. He invented the word dis-chaos. So we have order and we have disorder. And then we have chaos, which is supposed to be opposite or opposed to order, but there is no transformation of this word the way there is a transformation of the word order into disorder. So he thought of inventing the word dis-chaos. What would dis-chaos mean? Because it's order, but a different kind of order. And I'm thinking somehow perhaps this is similar to what the Romanian poet Lucian Blaga wanted to say when he said, disorder is another kind of order. And in reference to the Romanian village, the traditional village, which was and is very different from the Saxon village in Transylvania, where he was born. There are both villages, Saxon and Romanian. The Saxon villages are more organized, more strict, in a way more severe to an extent, but the Romanian villages are more, in a way, vulnerable, fragile, disorganized, disordered. But there is a more subtle form of order in that apparent disorder. So maybe Lucian Blaga was correct. Also, I read that in science, in the present, there is, well, for some time, there was talk about spontaneous order. What is spontaneous order? Apparently, nature is governed by some kind of order, which is not of the rational kind that we humans conceive. So if we can somehow bring to architecture that so-called spontaneous order, we become ourselves more spontaneous and more, in a way, more, enjoying life. Because I think life is can be quite a pain when lived in, uninspired ways, in almost in contradiction with our true nature. Playfulness is absent. But how can you create without playfulness? Frank Stella doesn't talk about playfulness here. He talks about chaos and turmoil. But somehow, perhaps we can say that playfulness saves us from the turmoil and from the chaos. And throwing the dice could perhaps have some beneficial effects both on our own lives and on our activities. And if it is a creative activity, all for the better. But coming back to Frank Stella and ending about him with this, I do think it's important that architects do not neglect what appears to be uncomfortable. Chaos is needed, actually, sometimes for, even God starting from chaos, no? We are less than God, of course, but chaos is very often that turmoil, fruitful turmoil from which many artists nourish themselves. Let's hope the architects do not avoid that chaos too often. So here there is that here there are the little rounded at the corners cubes, and these I just began. I didn't know how to start this presentation, so I just threw in kind of like, instead of dice, a few images. This is a fragment of a housing complex in France by Jean Renaudie. I'm going to show other images, and it is a remarkable, truly a remarkable housing complex, and I'm happy it was built. Unfortunately, he died young too, but he left something behind. We'll see more images of Jean Renaudie. This is a project I did myself for the Guggenheim Museum in Helsinki for a competition, but I didn't send my thought to Helsinki. But you can see randomness here, all right. I mean, I was literally emptying myself of my own will, and I allowed things to happen. And when I arrived at something that didn't displease me terribly, I stopped. But I will say more about this because I will show a few more images. Look at this urban planning. Can we call it's an unplanned so-called planning? I have great admiration for this, something like this. And this is in total opposition to what we do these days. I'm absolutely sure something like this is not even discussed in the Faculty of Urbanism, because this is not an ism. It's organic. I wish we could build in this way. But in order to build in this way, we have to have that wisdom and modesty of those people without training in architecture, because this was not built by people with training in architecture. But no one could contest the organicity, the charm of this fragment of a town. And there are many like this. I mean, most medieval towns and villages and cities do have this quality, a quality which we lost. We lost in the name of its majesty, reason. A reason, in so many cases, brings us on the verge of paralysis. And we have to reflect seriously on this. This is a house built by Kazuyo Sejima, by Sana. I'm going to show a few more images about it. Of course, these fragmentations, you know, there is an aleatory, you know, aspect to it that cannot be, you know, unseen. It's clear, but I had some reservations, and now maybe even more, because I think throwing the dice or you know, allowing change to manifest itself is not just about form. It's about many things, maybe even color, you know, maybe even the angles that we use, you know. Yes, there is a level of you know, indeterminacy here, but there is also a certain willfulness that I see. Maybe the willfulness is dictated by the limits of the plot of land. It's possible. Anyway, in praise of the donkey, why do I mention the donkey? Maybe you know, I mentioned this before. Le Corbusier was a great adversary of the donkey. He said that the donkey is stupid because the donkey avoids the big stones, while a man, meaning a human being, knows exactly where to arrive at the goal and goes in a straight line straight to the goal. So in opposition to the zigzagging of the donkey, Le Corbusier thought that the human being with his undisturbed will knows how to arrive at the goal, at the target. But strangely, paradoxically, Le Corbusier in his later years actually wanted to build a monument to the donkey in India. So maybe he changed his mind. I personally think in the present, we need badly zigzagging. We need badly the donkey that avoids the big stones. Now, to accuse of the donkey of having no will is a little bit out of place, because it's known that the donkey, if the donkey doesn't want to move, nothing can move the donkey. I mean, it could be almost a monument of tenacity. But you know, all in all, I think we need nature. Today, we need badly nature. Trees, grass, donkeys, birds, you name them. The more, the better. And the donkey as a symbol of that spontaneous order that nature mysteriously masters should not be forgotten, I think. Another image that I brought in, but I'll show many things in a more organized way very soon. Zigzagging architecture. I already mentioned this verb, which I like, to zigzag, with the zigzagging of the donkey, but it's about many things actually. This zigzagging. This is a building, of course, by Toyo Ito. I plan to show it more in detail. The Mediatek in Japan, which has the columns are approximating something of that chains mentality or activity of nature, although it sounds strange to talk about the mentality of nature. No, it's not quite the best language, but you understand the principles of nature do not avoid what we call, you know, chains. This is a building you can find. In fact, many people know it because it's an important building by Toyo Ito. Toyo Ito also had, the problem is I show some of these works quite often, and I didn't want to repeat myself, so I didn't include images about this work and other works which could have been present in this presentation in a very legitimate way. But because I don't like too much, I repeat certain things, I didn't include them. And now I regret a little bit, but I still have 200 pictures. It would have arrived at 400 very easily. Now, chains made visual art by John Cage. John Cage was a very interesting musician, composer, who advocated chains music, or the music of chains. And he made, if you see his musical notations, They are beautiful artworks and quite unusual. You wouldn't expect, you know, musical compositions and notations to look like this. Let's see some of his visual art, chains made visual art by John Cage, a very, very interesting man. You know, his art is indeed animated by the emptying of one's will, meaning his own will. Can we make architecture in this way? I think we can. I truly believe there is great potential actually in an art, in a will-less way of imagining, and I don't know about building, but initiating the project with as little will as possible and with as much naturalness, or now the word naturalness again is not very well chosen. I'm afraid today I want to improvise in a very inspired way, because I don't feel I'm very inspired. Maybe the gods of change want to sabotage me a little bit. I don't know, but I'll try my best. I will try to be intense and then not to utter too many stupidities. I love John Cage, and I suggest to you to search for his name on YouTube. You can listen to his music. You can see his art. He was a very, very interesting an avant-garde musician, an artist and thinker, and influenced, of course, by the Orient, by Zen. You know, I am asking myself, why architects don't do such drawings these days? Because we don't. You know, this kind of drawing in its purity and its lyricism, but it also in its esotericism, is something that architects don't do. I think we are too divorced from the metaphysical. We don't think and we don't feel in philosophical terms, in poetical terms. I understand, on one hand, is understandable because the architect works with measures, with matter, with materials, but the musician also works with, you know, of course, here this was a special musician because he advocated chains music, or the music of chains, or aleatoric music. But we could have an architecture of this sort. And actually there are already many buildings that are built in this way, and even many projects done in this way. Even Archigram had, to a certain extent, an aleatoric architecture. But let's look again at the graphic works by John Cage. You see, he welcomed disorder. He welcomed, you know, if you want to call it, chaos. And many artists did so. But architects are uncomfortable with this because they cannot control it. And the architect needs to control. And maybe if we begin to control less, it would be something positive happening. You know, I wonder again, why can't we conceptualize architecture in these terms? For example, at the beginning, in this way, possible way, there are many other ways, but let's imagine this way, with words. Let's say you have a site plan on which you have to build something, to imagine a building, and you just, you know, write, just like John Cage did on the site plan, some thoughts, some feelings expressed through words, kind of in a similar way, you know, and then transform those short fragments of text into possible buildings. You know, it's, or, you know, there are architects who use painting to start a project with. They start painting. Will Alsop did it, Massimiliano Fuchsas did it. Here is a musician, John Cage. John Cage was not an architect, but try to imagine as an architect that you begin a project with exactly this image, this drawing, this watercolor, or whatever it is. How would you make your building or buildings starting from something like this? I personally think it might be a very liberating project, because if I imagine starting an architecture project from what I look at now, I feel tempted to become very imaginative, and I think we need more imagination. Or like this, could an architect start, or work in this way, relating to a certain project? Why not? In an atmospheric way, why not? But unfortunately, we are so trapped in the rationalist paradigm that, to visualize our aspirations towards a building in this way is inconceivable. But it should be conceivable. If this works for a musician, why wouldn't it work for an architect who at least is a visual artist? Sorry, here I misspelled this. Every day is a good day. It was a series. I think there is even a book with his artworks. I'm talking about John Cage. I think they are beautiful. I like these graphic works. They are very sensitive, and you could imagine many things looking even at this almost non-existent drawing. He also has a book or a series called Hypermnesic. Apparently, I didn't know what this word means, so I searched on the web, and apparently it means someone who can recall in very vivid, very precise way a past. Interesting. So I'm thinking, what about a hypermnesic architecture? What would that be? So these are a few works from that series by John Cage, where you can see again that the willfulness, certainly the willfulness of the rationalist is absent. We are talking about something else, but art is in a way bringing us closer to what we reject, and that is nature. Again, I remember what Winnie Maas said, and I'm disappointed to mention again that I do not agree with what he said about outsmarting nature. No architect should ever say something like this, and no artist, and no musician, and no writer, and no human being, actually. We cannot outsmart nature. Musical notations. Now look at this. It's splendid. It is splendid. I have no other word. It's a musical, he performed music based on something like this. Isn't it beautiful graphically? How do you explain it? This is about, just as the architect makes a plan for a building, a musician, a composer writes these musical notations for performing a piece of music. But graphically, this is impeccable. It's a beautiful artwork. That is just a means towards achieving a certain music. Very, very nice. So again, if music can connect with the graphic art in this way, in this unexpected way, why couldn't architecture? Why couldn't a student in architecture make an architecture project kind of like this? What would the professor say? They would be speechless, because in order to make something like this, you have to have the open mind of a John Cage, and or to understand something like this. But it's all, in essence, it's about spirit. But since we despiritualized architecture completely, of course, we cannot imagine an architecture project, at least in its incipient phase, in this way or in this way. Isn't it beautiful? I think it is. How would you build, let's say, a fragment of a city, starting from this musical notations of John Cage. Now, okay, what is here perhaps could become a building because we have seen buildings kind of like this, but what do we do with the rest of the things? And yet architecture and music are sisters. You know, it was even said, I am only repeating something too well known, although very little is practiced. Architecture is a frozen music. Is it? Maybe it should be. Today I discovered when I prepared this, you know, experimental presentation, this gentleman, another composer with beautiful musical quotations, Robert Moran. Look at this. You know, it's the musical sheet for an opera. Music becomes graphic. Equally, I would say graphic work could become musical. And equally, I would say architecture and architectural projects could become musical. What if we ask, what if we make the plan of a building or the plan of a, you know, a town or a village or a fragment of a town or a village or a city in such a way that a conductor looking at those plans could perform their musicality, could perform their music. Let's imagine that we can make plans for a house or a street or a housing complex and so on in such a way that a musician could perform a music just looking at the plans, at the drawings, at the sections, whatever is shown there. Can we do that? But so again, this is done not by a graphic artist, this is done by a composer. This as well, it's magnificent. I think it's magnificent. I keep saying to myself and to others, architecture needs badly metaphysics. It needs to escape the banality of its approach to what architecture is. Of course, in the end, I mean, it has to come back to matter, to materials, to dimensions. It does need them, but it shouldn't start with them. Look at this too. Imagine a building built from this, or from this, or from both, two buildings face to face. Although these are notations, musical notations for a musical piece. You see, 4 visions. Very, very nice. They are cryptical for someone like me who doesn't have the necessary musical knowledge and doesn't know about the arcane aspects of avant-garde music. But I admire them with my eye. Angels of silence. Is the architect thinking about such, you know, distant matters, angels of silence? And what do I see there? Maria Rusu, viola. Obviously, I'm becoming patriotic. A Romanian musician there on the poster. Maria Rusu, viola. When will an architect collaborate with Maria Rusu or with a musician or with a composer or so on for a project together? Wouldn't it be beautiful? I think it would be. Why don't we do it? Chaos theory, fractals and architecture. Of course, they seem to do chaos and fractals. Somehow they seem to be neighbors in a way, any kind of fragmentation perhaps. And yes, architecture in some attempts lately could connect with chaos and fractals. Now, I show a very interesting house built where else? In Japan. The Daita 2019 house by Suzuko Yamada Architects. I love this house. So this innovative Tokyo home was designed to mimic a forest. Japanese architect Suzuko Yamada recalled the trip to Africa and the improvised architecture of nature for the inspiration in her striking 3-story design. Here it is. The rationalist would become speechless. The rationalist would have, you know, probably some kind of troubles with the heart, maybe the pulse would accelerate, or the other way, because the rationalists cannot conceive something like this. The rationalists to think that this is nonsense, that this is unacceptable. But what to look at here is a happy family living quite well in this house in Japan, and they commissioned the architect to do this. The architect is a lady. Bravo to her. I mean, she has all my admiration for this building. You know, it's a building which also almost becomes a non-building. It's a building which wants to become a forest. Yes, it wants to become like this here, or like this here. Compare it with, of course, it has another side to it in the back. But what I see in the front is in opposition. It wants to become nature. Let's put it this way. And it is about process. It is about becoming. It is not about being. It is about becoming. And it is about embracing change. Change, yes. The vitality of life depends actually on change. How beautiful are actually change encounters. When the rain starts, okay, you might not have the umbrella on you, like in Paris, where the rain starts out of the blue sky. It's okay. Life itself is a sum of such unexpected occurrences, you know. But unfortunately, the architect is so afraid of the unexpected that wouldn't accept easily the house that the Japanese built. And you know, as it is outside, it's almost the same inside. You say it's a house in the process of becoming, you know, but I love it like this, you know, because it's like a beginning. It's the promise of a house. In Turkey, there is this saying, when the house is ready, meaning is finalized, here comes death. This house does not welcome or invite death because it's not yet finalized, it's not yet done, or so it appears to be. And I like this fact. Okay, I like processes, I like becoming, it's true, but there is a life here that cannot be denied. And the front elevation is magnificent. In fact, I'm not even sure it can be called elevation any longer. Look, the interior is also, I think, beautiful. It's a knot in a way, a web, of relationships. But I see the books, I see shelves, I'm absolutely sure the owners of this house are special themselves. They are rather well-to-do, you know. They commissioned an architect to build this house for them. You see the car, but they also wash clothes. You'll see in some pictures hanging clothes, you know, although they probably, or maybe they don't have a washing machine. If this is so, all for the better. Excellent house. And how do you plan this? I guess at a certain point, at least, you do have to plan something. But at the beginning, at least, you are rather in a fog. It's about welcoming the disorder of life, the beautiful disorder of life, something which can be encountered in many traditional towns and villages and cities. But now, since the so-called enlightened modernity, everything had to be rational and prescribed with severity often. But fortunately, there is a reaction to that, and here we have it. An example, of course, there are others, but I love this house. But again, if you make such a project in the architecture school, you would be dismissed, and you shouldn't be dismissed. No, you shouldn't be dismissed. Quite the opposite. You should be applauded. This is a house which says, you know, I don't have rigid convictions, you know, and I love its fragility. Well, towards this street, because in the back it's a little bit different. I guess any life, including that of a building, has some dualities, maybe unavoidably. But I wonder what this child growing up in such a house feels. Um, I'm tempted to imagine that will grow like a healthy human being without the dogmatic, rigid, paralyzing and paralyzed convictions. Now you see, there is a part which is not so different from, you know, this one. In fact, it's almost identical. But we can forgive this part of the house if we contemplate or focus on this one. Um, yes, it's changed. It's you know, it's unplanned almost, or maybe without almost. It's possible. I like it very much, and you are going to see a little bit later a new facade for San Lorenzo competition I launched many years ago, and an Italian architect who at that time was living in Great Britain sent a project kind of in this spirit to cover the elevation, the unfinal, non-finalized facade of San Lorenzo by Brunelleschi with something like this that you see here. And I thought was a brilliant idea. The child is learning the piano here. Nice. This child, in my opinion, almost unavoidably will become, you know, an adversary of dogma. And the tree, you see the lady, the owner of the house, you know, hanging a shirt here for, you know, this moves me because it's about life with simple things. Yes. Well, that's not what mainstream architecture advertises. You know, you have to have a washing machine. Everything has to be clean, no disorder, nothing without being controlled. Well, life is not like this. Look at this curtain. You know, it's as it is because of a certain action upon it, and to open the window or whatever. It's okay. Great house, truly great, much better than Villa Savoie. Sorry, Monsieur Le Corbusier. I couldn't live in Villa Savoie. I just couldn't. There is no surprise that no one lives there. But here I could live, yes. And you don't even need shoes if you live in this house, as you can see. Someone is looking at the laptop. I am looking at someone looking at the laptop. I am looking at the screen of a laptop, at someone looking at the screen of the laptop inside the picture. Anyway, you see here the sign of life. You know, this is eternal. You know, we are in the sophisticated Japan, but this can be seen anywhere in the world except in some stiff, you know, urban quarters where no one would do something like this. But although obviously these people are not, you see the car and you know, they build this house. They could afford it, of course, a washing machine. But this structure in front of the house kind of invites for the improvisational little acts like this, you know. And I think even the clothes are happy where they are. Yes, they breathe some, you know, more or less fresh air, okay, in as much as possible in a modern city. Nice. Nice, because it is saying yes to the vitality of life, unrestrained. Okay, now these are the drawings published on Arch Daily, a little bit too sterile for my taste after we saw those beautiful musical sheets, musical notations by those two composers. What can we do? Fortunately, the built house is much better than what we look at here. But, you know, that's what it is. These were made for presentation, I guess. I don't like them. I hate them. Because there is no life in them. Again, if we compare these plans for otherwise a very nice house, very alive house, with the musical notations of those two composers we saw, we see the difference between a non-musical architect and very visual musical people. Now, a new facade for San Lorenzo, I mentioned this. This was done about 20 years ago. And Gianluca Pelisi from Italy proposed. Unfortunately, the project, I don't have it in a sufficiently good resolution, but I amplified a little bit 2 images, like you see the section. So imagine this is the building of Brunelleschi, the famous San Lorenzo, the facade for which even Michelangelo made a proposal but was not built. And the Italian architect proposed in front of it something very similar to what we saw in the house in Japan. Of course, just a project. And you see the rain falling on this scaffolding, because essentially it's a scaffolding celebrating again life, the disorder of life, rain, the sunlight, you name it, the wind. And this is another image of the same project. He obviously welcomed chaos or disorder or you know, manifestations of what you know, more or less scientifically it is called the spontaneous order of nature. Now Tadashi Kawamata, again and again and again and again and again, Japan, the Japanese. Now we are going to see a Japanese artist, what he does also in the name of aleatory actions in art, connected somehow with architecture. Look at this. You know, he uses all kind of recycled materials. Now, maybe, I mean, I don't think everything is pure, but I like what I look at, you know, because here we see again what one can do with imagination, you know, in an unplanned way. I mean, okay, you could have a strategy, right, to bring these things together, but that's all there is, a strategy. And you know, please remember this name is important, an important artist, Tadashi Kawamata. He has also a partner, Catherine, I forgot her last name. He does this sort of thing where he works with you know, found objects, found materials, and transforms them through different configurations into art. Here he is working with a lot of wood, and by the way of it, we are going to see something to an extent a little bit similar done in Romania in an attic by 2 students, and one of them is here. I hope he's still here. Kawamata. It is art, but you know, just like in the case of the house we just saw in Japan, you wonder, you know, maybe this is something in the process of becoming. It's something that cannot remain in this way. Well, it is an artwork. That's what he does, and he arrived even at MAC in Vienna, in the museum. He did something similar, not so dramatic, but here he did. Unfortunately, I didn't find another picture, you know, sabotaging the certitude, the formal certitudes of the facade of a church in this way. And it's good, it's refreshing, because it's again, it's about the beginning. It's about the promise of something that you cannot configure or figure out from the beginning. It's an invitation to start anew, to look what he did in Toronto, I think, in Canada, between these 2 stiff neoclassical buildings. he brought in this maddening, you know, I don't know how to call it, you know, rurality, arte povera, you know, whatever it is. This thing is adding something, is not subtracting. Well, it is subtracting from the stiffness of the neoclassical buildings, and is polemical towards them. And I think we need such polemics. Kawamata, the Toronto project from 1989. Chains, aleatory. You know, this is indeterminacy. How do you make the precise plan for this? You can't. Now we arrive at Jean Renaudie, the French architect who unfortunately also died rather young, but he left something remarkable, and it's this housing complex, which I admire very much, and which again is not talked about in our urbanism schools and classes. Why? Because it's dangerous. You know, this you cannot control through reason, you know, through regulations, through dogmas. This man was a visionary. In the 60s, early 70s, he built something like this, you know, and no one talks about him, when in fact we should talk about him. It's incredible what education chooses to ignore. In the name of what? In the name of sterility. That's the reason why, because we are afraid of something like this. But he built it in France. I so regret when I was in France. I searched for it, I couldn't find it. But maybe if the pandemic goes away, I'll have a chance to go back. I want to see Jean Renaudie because he was excellent. You know, it's now some people talk about houses, you know, becoming mountains, right? Even Ingels and others, but Renaudie did this 50 years ago, and I think in more convincing ways, actually. Now, indeterminate arrangement. Here is, I was rather ironical, because how could you arrange, you know, in an indeterminate way? When you arrange, you already manifest your will. If you manifest your will, indetermination vanishes. These are some images of tables that I arranged together with some students in the School of Architecture here in a moment of madness, but refreshing madness. Maybe all madness is refreshing to an extent, at least. We played with these tables that exist in the studios, and we turned them upside down. We found pleasure in creating chaos, and I have to say, the students, after we did this, they found an alcove for themselves, each one in a different place, and began to draw and to. It was very stimulating. Because yes, this apparently totally irrational so-called arrangement was actually a vital invitation towards a beginning, towards starting the adventure of a project or whatever. We enjoy doing it. Of course, after a few hours, we put the tables in the back position, which was actually a sad thing to do. I regret, but we did it then, and I still think we need experiments, and we need, you know, the vitality of turning things upside down when necessary, sometimes at least. Chaos, chains. It's not really chaos. I think none of the students that you know, worked on this, if I am to use the word worked, they played, they were playful, felt that this was chaotic. No, they loved it. Yes, you could say, again, the functionalist would say, You cannot draw on this, not with a T-square and a rectangle. Well, I'm not so sure. You could, maybe standing up or whatever, you know. I wonder what kind of a project would you do, you know, on this, on such disturbed tables. Anyway, we move forward. Here they are, two of the students with myself here, you know, working to disturb even further the, you know, the furniture in this studio. Now, Fujimoto, the final wood house, you know it. I talked about it, you saw it, you didn't need me to discover it, to see it. But I'll show a few images of it because Fujimoto is indeed relevant to this theme. Architecture and randomness. Look at this interior, you know, it's random, you know, it's, you know, it's a space which is uncomfortable, which could be comfortable if you make some, you know, additional gestures there, or I don't know, but all in all, it's true, it's a cube. So towards the outside, there is determinacy, but inside there is indeterminacy. And this indeterminacy allows people to employ the space in unprescribed and unplanned ways. And I think this is a virtue of what they built here, or he built here. There is a variety of activities that take place which are not prescribed as usually they are prescribed in a so-called functional plan. Here you don't have such a thing. There are no prescriptions, besides the fact that, yes, towards the outside is a cube. But once you enter the cube, you envision your own choices within it. And I like this building, you know, it's, yes, it's an unconventional, so-called unconventional building, but I think we need such at least once to be built. Yeah, that's how it looks towards the outside, and you see even the openings have a level of capriciousness. They these erosions of the walls towards the outside are, you know, randomly placed, but it's okay. Now, graphic works of Henri Michaud. Why do I mention Henri Michaud? Because when I made a presentation on Luigi Moretti, I discovered that he had a collection of graphic works by Henri Michaud. And I remember that Henri Michaud was friends with Émile Cioran. And Émile Cioran even had, I think, at least one or two drawings by Henri Michaud, his friend, his Belgian artist. And his drawings, his graphic works are very relevant to this theme. Here they are. You know, this is the summum of randomness, you know. But I wouldn't say they are, you know, you would say there is no center, there is no order. I'm not so sure. It's an implicit order, not an explicit one. Any good artwork, just like the musical notations of John Cage and the other composer, being a good graphic work, does have some implicit, sometimes subtle order within it, although it's not apparent. I would say it's the same with the drawings of Henri Michaud. An interesting artist, poet, and so on, Henri Michaud. And then you'll see a door gate, a gate designed for a building of Moretti. An artist, not himself, designed it, but kind of in this spirit. So this is the relationship in this case between the artist and the poet Henri Michaud and the designer, at least, who made that gate for the Italian architect. Anyway, but the Italian architect had this. These were part of his art collection. And yes, his architecture is not like this, but I think he liked. Maybe he would have loved to do such an architecture, but he couldn't. Anyway, so Luigi Moretti commissioned or asked Claire Falkenstein to design the big iron fence that encloses, it's called the cave. It's a Villa Saracena that Luigi Moretti built, and it was published on Domus in 1970. But what interested me here is the iron fence, and here it is. It's like a drawing by Michaud, Henri Michaud, you know, and you know, you would say it's in Romanian, it's a beautiful word that I truly like. Mâzgăleală is a scribbling, you know, but it's done with iron. I think it's very nice, and indeed, it's about taking change or allowing change to manifest itself. As I put it, let's give change a chance. It's a very nice fence, gate, or whatever it is, but I think it's very nice. And I'm happy that it was built. Now, Sana, the Nishinoyama house, about which I have some reservations in general, but I still included it. I didn't have too much time to reflect on to do it or not to do it. I like the fact that there is some kind of aleatory movement here, and I think she did a good thing. Now, is this a single house? Apparently it is quite big compared to the other houses. It's described as being a house, not houses. So by fragmenting otherwise, you know, oversized monolithical thing, she or they connected with the houses around. But I actually thought before I studied this project, I thought it was several houses, not just one. For just one house, I think it's just too big. I still hope it's more than just one house, although I didn't see the plural in its descriptions. All in all, there is here a certain movement, and you see the plan. Yes, it's done with the strict lines, many rooms. It's hard for me to believe that this is just one house. Now, it's probably used by a number of people. But even here, we see some kind of rhizomic, you know, intermingling, or I don't know how to call it. It's a certain fragmentation which borders on disorder, even if the lines are strictly, you know, rectangular. Sana, Kazuyo Sejima. I still think it's a good work. It's a good work built in Kyoto, Japan again. Now, repairing ad hoc the roof structure. This was done by two students who were attempting and succeeded to repair a roof structure without planning. Maybe, I mean, from what I know, from one of the students I was talking to, and I think he's here, Bogdan, you know, there was a certain strategy in their minds, but they almost in an ad hoc way, they started to repair an old roof that was deteriorating. And so this is the old roof. I'm just, why did I include this? Because it is really about the, well, the pain, but also the joy of ad hoc interventions, you know. They're not construction workers. They are, yes, architecture students. But they took upon themselves to build this work in this spontaneous way, and they did it with wood that you know was from, I don't know how it is called in English, pallets. Anyway, I guess there are only Romanians here, so you understand. You know, to make that wood from pallets available to repair a roof is, I would say, adventurous enough. And you will see that in the end, the structure looks rather convincing and interesting. And if you plant it in a rational, cerebral, so-called normal way, here they are. working on the, dismantling the. I mean, we see some. This is not a model of what they achieved, but it almost looks like a model of it. Of course, it's disorder. It's, they just put some pieces of wood here, but all in all, I mean, okay, maybe I'm a little bit nostalgic, a little bit patriotic, a little bit, I don't know what. I'm friends with Bogdan, but what I'm trying to say is, building is actually not such a, we make it, terrible through excessive premeditations, excessive, signatures, stamps, approvals of all kinds. Think of the builders of, old times, or in villages still in Africa or some other parts of the world. They build quite well without all that nonsense that makes our life totally unbearable. And here they are, you see, repairing the structure of the roof in an improvised way. And I would say ingeniously, joyously, and it probably works. I hope it does. But I mean, I imagine the work was hard, and yet I think there was also joy, and probably more joy than working for some project in the school where look, the opening. I mean, the hole in the roof was significant, but they repaired it. And they repaired it, welcoming, the joy of improvisation, and it's fine. Jazzistic architecture, sure, why not? And look at it. Yeah, I think it's much more interesting than if you would have made it, like everything else in the roof. Okay, it's different, but what's wrong with being different? I think it's fine. It's a wounded building. It's a wounded roof. But the wound received some affection and some work, and through the randomness of the whole thing, arrived at a certain functional outcome, and that's good. So, these pieces of wood were not, cut to order, measured to, no, they were found, as I said, in those pieces which were made for something else, not repair roofs with them. But look, this is truly a sustainable activity. We have to consider it as such, to make the most with the least. And yes, in a spontaneous way, maybe partially, I'm sure the professional builder would say this is no, but why not? It's much more interesting and creative than what a so-called professional builder would have done. Look at this. It's almost an artwork by itself. Now, the Wotruba Church in Vienna, done by a sculptor who built a building, and one of the most remarkable buildings in Vienna was built by a sculptor. And look at this. Is there indeterminacy and randomness here? Of course it is. Yeah, an architect with formal training would not have easily done something like this. No. No, but someone who didn't study architecture was free enough to do it. So Wotruba did it. Is there randomness here? Yes, it is. Would Caesar have loved it? I don't know. I don't know. He was still an emperor, so I don't know. But being a great emperor, maybe he had the imagination that would have appreciated something like this. It's possible. Napoleon, who was kind of the equivalent of Caesar, was himself a complex man. I read he was rather skeptical about religion. He said that religion is what keeps the poor from not murdering the rich. In a way, it is probably true. I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but somehow the word murdering is, you know, I mean, try to imagine that without religion, the poor would murder the rich. Of course, the churchmen would protest, would say that, sorry, Monsieur Napoleon, this is not why we have religion. That's not faith. But it's possible that Napoleon was not so far from truth. Now I don't know if I okay. No, I don't feel like showing. I have a few things that I did. I should have shown something else now, but the problem is I did. Well, it's true. I found pleasure in doing unintentional architectures, which are about chains architectures. Yes, unintentional. How do you make a possible building unintentionally? Because most of the time, you know, it's the first thing that animates a project. The intention. What is the intention? How do you? Well, what if you make buildings without an intention? Like Lebesgue said, we should first build our buildings and then learn how to live in them. You know, how would you build a building without thinking of its functions, without intentions? Can you build a building without intentions? Well, when many years ago, a young architect who was trained in Cluj told me about ArchiCAD, and he gave me a, you know, I installed on my laptop or my computer ArchiCAD, so I began to play. And I played, and I found joy in playing without intentions. Yes, it's not yet so-called serious architecture. It's true, it's not. But in its superficiality, there is the promise of something interesting, a possible interesting outcome. Okay, I'll show you quickly because I showed this before and I don't want to repeat myself. A possible skyscraper here. I did, well, this was something else. I bought this, it was a game with pieces of wood. I bought it from a flea market. And I was playing with them, and here it is, a possible skyscraper. Is it possible? I think so. Yes. Each piece is, in fact, something not very different. Was built recently in Amsterdam, the village, by MVRDV. Well, part of it, but it's the same strategy or mentality at work. You know, it's here they are all the same. Imagine that you have here one apartment which is you know, prefabricated, built in the and you bring them in and you play with them as I played on the table with these things. And I think it could be a very interesting skyscraper or tower. Let's not know, maybe the word skyscraper is too tall, so to speak. But you know, again, playing without an intention. I was just playing, absent-minded. Can we do architecture in an absent-minded way? I think it can. And you know what? At the postgraduate course in Vienna, Excessive, run by Hernan Diaz Alonso, the students who were already architects, young architects, Hernan Diaz Alonso, who was the director of this program, told them, don't make any sketch. In other words, don't have any intentions. Just plunge into the project without any kind of premeditation, without any kind of, you know, intention. And it worked. They did brilliant works. You know, I did this thing without any kind of intention. Of course, if you want to make it into a feasible project, and it is possible, you have to do something else more than this. But at the beginning, you can work without intentions. You can start a project without any analysis. I know the schools of architecture are obsessed by analysis. No one talks about synthesis. They only talk about analysis. Well, what if you do a project without any analysis? You just, in an absent-minded way, like a child who loses himself in playing, as Jean Nouvel claimed that he always worked in this way, and if he was sincere, it's appreciable because it's true. If you can work like a child who absent-mindedly, plays with the seriousness of a child who absent-mindedly plays, you can do great things, I'm sure, without analysis, without all that unnecessary, stiff, and ridiculous in the end premeditation and cerebralization and intellectualization and graphs and all that nonsense that actually nobody looks at. Much of the work that is done for that is useless, really useless and joyless by definition. Now, a possible structure. This was a bag with potatoes that I bought. Unfortunately, I had pictures also in color. It was red, but these are the black and white pictures. I thought it could be a very nice structure, but it was a bag in which I brought some potatoes home. I wouldn't mind at all if I would be able to build such a building with such a steel structure. Yes. Sorry, the pictures are not great. I really did this in a hurry. I should have put the colored ones in red, but I still like the idea. You buy a bag of potatoes, and as an architect, you admire the structure, the weaving of the bag, and here could be a possible interesting, inciting, enticing, structure, quite fluid, no? Yes. Anyway, now this is a project I showed before very quickly, but I showed an image of it and I'll show it again. Initially, I did this with ArchiCAD, and now I regret I didn't persevere in this. This was the site. This I did again absent-minded, meaning in a random way. With ArchiCAD, a very old version. I can only work with that old version. But this could have been a very interesting building, just like this, playing, if I am to express myself in unacceptable ways. But then, I did something else. This was the site in Helsinki for a competition for the Guggenheim Museum. This was the site. And in the same way, without premeditation, welcoming randomness, being absent-minded and being very playful, I did this. This is the top view of the building. I called it, if the icebergs are melting, let's build an iceberg. So here it is. That's all I did, because that's all I know how to do myself with my own hands in ArchiCAD. Not everything is perfect here, but I wish I knew more. But all in all, it's kind of something that I could have been perhaps not too ashamed if I developed. Anyway, but done again without premeditation, just in a random way, and you can see in the plan. You cannot plan this. It's impossible. In a way, this is also kind of a forest, like that forest that lady wanted to make her house that she built, well, for other people, look like. And then possible architectures, so-called architectures, randomly conceived, but they could be pre-architectures. I could myself, maybe not digitally, but manually. But again, what I show here is the same strategy without intentions, absent-minded, meaning emptying yourself of your own will to play until you arrive at some kind of a so-called product, a configuration that satisfies you, and well, maybe not only aesthetically, for a certain purpose. There are formal explorations, but form is important. And because, imagine you build this without knowing how to use it later. but that you can discover later. You just build what you see, exactly what you see. And then if you need to inhabit the thing, you begin, you create a door, you create a window, you make an opening, maybe you enclose, you bring in an additional enclosure or something. And I think it's possible to build in this way. You know, here you have just a beginning without a strong intentional mechanism to govern your gesture. And I did all kinds of these are not very dramatic, and especially after parametry and all the rest, this could seem maybe inadequate for our time, maybe. But here, I could imagine an apartment building or housing, social or I don't know what, with apartments in these boards, and then with this unexpected, because if I would have used my reason, I would not have made such codes. Impossible. They came into being. I didn't search for them. I found them. That's why I said found architectures. As Picasso said, I do not search, I find. So these things found me. In fact, I could even say I didn't find them, they found me. Playingly, I was playing. But it's very liberating. And, if someone may be a little more, no, I wouldn't say, because I try to be serious too, but someone with some qualities that I do not have would take this and develop it into a housing complex. I'm thinking it's possible. I would love to live here, to have a vertical apartment that I enter from the top after I take an elevator here and go to a corridor and then descend into my own quarter here. Maybe. I'm not cynical. Again, change pre-architectures. This was an exasperated attempt to, well, here I had an intention to design houses of love around Valentine's Day, some 7 years ago. I made about 40 of them. They are not yet houses. I'm very aware of this, but I could make a house out of this. I could. And if I use my conventional wisdom trained formally in a school, I would not have arrived at something like this. It can be very liberated to allow change to inform you, and you become just manipulated in a way by change. Anyway, this was, I think, is the last image of this series, and I end with again a possible, well, born from frustration, house of love. That's all.